I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to make fresh strawberry rhubarb pie, mostly fresh. I have 2 cups of rhubarb here that is from last year, but I froze it and it's perfect for this recipe. So thawed and well drained. So first thing we're going to do is make the filling and get that together, and then we'll make the gluten-free pie crust. 2 cups of well-drained, fresh or frozen rhubarb. And I have about 4-ish cups of strawberries. I know it seems like a lot, but it's a deep dish pie. And fruit pies always cook down a little bit. So I'm just gonna mix this up before we add in the other ingredients. 1 cup of honey. And I'm just gonna mix this around, give it a head start before we add in the flour. As always, I'll put in the equivalents to sugar. 2/3 cup of my gluten-free flour. And I have 2 teaspoons of dried orange peel. I'll put a link below of the brand that I use. And normally when you use this, you would rehydrate with some water, but because this will have extra liquid, I'm just putting it in dry. You can see it's already releasing quite a bit of liquid. And we're just gonna set this aside and kind of see how much liquid it releases, and then we might add a little bit more flour. So just set this aside and we'll move on to the crust. And I have my oven at 425 preheating, and I have some foil and a deep dish pie pan and a foil lined cookie sheet pizza pan. So that's all ready. And for the crust, you could do this in a food processor if you want to. 2/3 and 2 tablespoons of room temperature-ish butter, and 2 cups of my gluten-free flour mix, 1 teaspoon of salt, pastry blender, and just start cutting in your butter. As I've mentioned before, use a butter knife to help get these big chunks. You can even use the butter knife to stir it around. See what you've got. We're almost there. Okay, that's looking really good. And it's about pea-sized pieces. That's what we're looking for. Fork, and just stir it around. I loosen it up a little bit if there's any kind of stuck to the side of the bowl before we add in our liquid. I have 1 egg here, room temperature, even though we're going to be adding really cold water. And I've got 1 cup of water here that I've had in the fridge. We won't use it all, but it's easier to have more. But I always start with 1 cup and see how much we'll actually use. But first I'm going to use this same fork and mix up this egg. You can just use an egg white, but I'm using the whole egg today. So once your egg is all mixed, just pour it in. And mix this around before we add in the water. And I'm going to start slowly adding in the water just to some of the dry areas. And we're looking for it to start holding together. So once your dough is ready, I have a bowl scraper here. I'm just going to start forming it into a ball. If you use xanthan gum in your flour mix, don't use the egg. But because we used the whole egg, it took less water. And just start forming it into a ball. This is a 2-crust pie crust that we're making today, so we will divide this. But start out with 1 big ball. Move everything out of the way. So parchment paper. And I'm gonna flatten this just a little bit. Bench scraper, and I'll probably go a little bit less than half for the bottom. Again, it is a deep dish pie dish. And save this for later. And I've got some more flour here. This is my gluten-free flour, and we're just gonna sprinkle the surface, form it into a flat disc, flat-ish. More flour, rolling pin, and I like to just keep it moving. And if it breaks apart, just piece it back together. And keep flour underneath it. You could use 2 pieces of parchment paper, one for the top, but this is good. Adding extra flour as needed. You want to just make sure that you can move it easily around your parchment paper. And once you think it's big enough, take your pie dish and just look to see where you're at with how well it will fit in the pan. We need to go just a little bit bigger. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit on the top here and roll it around my rolling pin. Use the parchment paper to help you. And just gently put it in there. If it breaks apart a little bit, just piece it back together. And you can start turning your edges over. Flour your fingers if you need to. And I just start building up the edge a little bit before I make it look pretty. So just so I know that it's kind of even thickness all the way around. And you can take dough from somewhere else and just piece it on. And if you notice any little cracks in here, just pat them back together. Gluten-free dough is, in a sense, easier to work with than a regular flour pie crust. Once you've got all of your edges built up, you can just start making your edge. You could do this with a fork. There's all kinds of designs, but this is the one I do the most. So now that we're finished with the bottom, just put that over there. Same parchment paper, we're going to roll out the top. And I know with regular flour pie crust, you want to refrigerate your pie shell before you put it in the oven, but I don't mind. So flatten it out a little bit. And this one, I'm not worried if it's in a circle because I'm going to cut it into strips. Once your pie crust is the thickness that you want it to be, I have a little fluted edge roller here. I'm just going to start cutting this into strips. You could use a ruler and measure, but this is fine for me. Now that our top crust is ready to go, I'm going to move everything out of the way, bring our pie shell back, put in the filling, and show you how to put the top on. So stir your filling and see how much liquid you've got. And I still have some flour left over that I was rolling out the crust with. I'm just going to start sprinkling some in just to absorb some of this excess liquid. And I ended up adding in about a half a cup of my gluten-free flour mix just to thicken it up a little bit more. Scrape down your bowl. So it's still a little bit liquidy, but that's all right. We want it to have some juice in there. So put this aside and bring back our bottom crust. And we're going to start pouring this in. Flatten it out. I have 2 tablespoons of cut up butter. And then we're going to start putting on our strips of pastry, whatever design that you'd like. And you can just break off or just kind of pat it. And I don't mind if it breaks a little bit there. And I don't even mind if it reaches all the way to the edge or not. And you could interweave these if you want to, but this is easy to just lay them on top. And if you notice that one breaks, that's okay, because find a match and just stick it on there. And once you're happy with what it looks like, I have an egg here and a brush. We're going to give this an egg wash. And there's a little bit of extra flour that I didn't dust off of the strips, but that's fine. And get the edges. If you don't want to use an egg as a wash, you could just do a little bit of milk and do kind of a milk wash. And if you're using sugar, you could just sprinkle sugar on top of this after you do whatever wash that you want. But we're just doing egg today. So 425 for the oven. I'm gonna put this in with the foil. Don't forget the foil. Only need 3. Put this in the oven for about, I'll probably check it at about 40 minutes. It'll probably go for an hour, but you want to make sure it's golden brown and the juices start to bubble. So my strawberry rhubarb pie has been cooling for about 3 hours or so, and it's still just barely warm in the middle, but we're gonna cut into it and I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. It will set up a little bit better after having been in the fridge. I have some whipped cream. And let's give this a taste. It's pretty good. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, let me know and we'll see you on the next one.